yeah, so far I spent my professional studies also with understanding my background, understanding the relation between Germany and Kurdistan and stuff like that. So obviously, I look at it right now in this situation. So why am I here in the first place? To shed some light on that. Um, in February, I handed in my master's thesis. I finished my studies, so I thought I will come back to my family for 1 month and just stay here and have a good time. But guess what? The city and the whole area is under lockdown. So and actually, my flight back was also canceled. So I will spend some time here and obviously I also I will always look at the news and compare what's going on and compare the situation, everything. So I look at that from that perspective. And as Ahmed already said, like I did my master's in political sciences, my bachelor's was in political sciences and sociology. And so yeah, I always try to always like also look at it from an analytic perspective. But first, like disclaimer that I want to make, like there's a lot of social scientists out there right now that they want to use the situation to verify claims that they already have done, or they bring these big talks and big theories who's obviously also academically in the field, as someone who gets knowledge and has like access to the Kurdish speaking side and also the German speaking side. But this is not something universal. This is not something that can be like 100% verified. So I think this is like one important disclaimer in this time of the coronavirus. There are many people cannot live with scientific uncertainty and actually want to have like 100% truth, and that's not going to happen. So this is my quick disclaimer. So first of all, I gathered some basic statistics so we have like an overview of the situation and can just compare what's going on right now in the Kurdistan region of Iraq and Germany. So today, to repeat that, I talk about the Kurdistan region of Iraq, which is a region per Iraqi constitution. So it has a lot of areas where the Kurdistan region is independent. But I will not be talking about Kurds in Syria or Turkey or Iran, which have a really hard situation right now, because this will go too far and it is quite different, to be honest, at this point. So what is the number of cases that we all have? As of for today, we have 128 cases that have been found in Kurdistan. So when I talk about the cases, I'm including everyone, the person that that healed in the meantime, also the people that the people that recovered, and sadly also the people, of course, that died due to the virus, right? So in Kurdistan, we have 128. We have 453 people that recovered so far, and we have 2 people that died due to the coronavirus. In Germany, we have 58,247. We have 8,481 that recovered, and we have 455 that died. But we have to think about these numbers in a different way, because one specific about Germany is that Germany does not necessarily count in everyone who was positive due to the coronavirus into the coronavirus death rate, right? So what, for example, happens is if a person, dies and was not tested for coronavirus before, then they will not be tested after they passed away, right? So this is also an issue when it comes to the statistics from the German side. So we do not know who had the coronavirus if that person was not tested after they passed away, right? Of course, this is a lot of numbers. So if we look at the percentages, it's also quite interesting. So if we look at the percentage of the overall number, 41% of the people that contracted the coronavirus in Kurdistan recovered. And compared to that, 14.5% in Germany recovered so far. When we compare the death rate, then in Kurdistan we have a death rate so far of 1.5%. In Germany, 0.78%, right? So first of all, you would think, okay, Kurdistan is doing really great, and Kurdistan is really, secure and taking care of the situation. I mean, like, obviously, right? So Kurdistan, the Kurdistan region really early on started to, before there was even the lockdown of the cities, there was like different measures. So for example, in public spaces, there was a lot of cleaning going on. Big gatherings were not allowed. Also, you had the situation that the Friday sermons at the mosque were not allowed anymore. You had the situation that, for example, restaurants and different cafes and stuff like that were not allowed to use their own cups or anything else, and everything had to have you had to use like these one-way cups, one-way spoons, one-way everything, So these were all these measures that were going on. I actually landed on March 3rd, and when I landed in Erbil, which is the capital of the Kurdistan region, and I was immediately actually tested for fever, right? And you had the feeling that there's a lot going on whenever you watch TV, or you are outside and you see some I don't know, info wall or something, and in the airport or something. Everything is about information on the coronavirus. So this information policy started really early on, while in Germany that was not really the case. So you had an information policy, but that was, let's say, it was quite far away from everyday life, right? So you have the Robert Koch Institute, which is the main institute that also works with the government, that also gives them policy information and health information and everything that they need to know. But this is, of course, a very specialized level of knowledge gathering, right? So I had the feeling that there was like still a big gap when it came to that. People were denying it and everything. But in the end, what is really important to look at also for the further development between the two, comparing the two countries or the two regions, is that we also have to look at the capacities of the health system, obviously, right? So we have to look at where and how many intensive care units you have, okay? So if you compare that, in Kurdistan, we have approximately 200 intensive care units spread over the whole region. So we're talking Duhok Governorate, Erbil Governorate, and Sulaimaniyya Governorate. In Germany, we have 28,031. So if you calculate it to beds in the intensive care unit per 100,000 inhabitants, then in Germany you have a ratio of 33.7 beds per 100,000 Germans or people who live in Germany, right? Whereas in Kurdistan you have 2.39 beds per 100,000 people. So this is where it really gets serious, right? So Kurdistan is, of course, not only getting through these policies really quickly because it is just something that they want to do, but it's a really, really hard situation, and they are fully aware that the health system can absolutely not cope with so many cases if they spread out exponentially as that happened in other cases, right? So how did the situation develop all in all? So as I said, in Kurdistan in the beginning of March, there was a lot of different point-to-point things that were decided upon, but they really quickly decided that they will push through a lockdown of all places, right? So by March 14th, I mean, a few days before March 14th, I do not know the exact date, they already decided there is no possible travel allowed between the Kurdish cities, right? So highways were locked down, checkpoints were locked down, people had to stay in their region, and then from March 14 on, the cities were under actual lockdown. So how is the situation right now? Ever since, we are still in lockdown here, so I spend all of my days at home. And what is the situation? So the only businesses that are allowed to be open are pharmacies and supermarkets, right? So these are the only two ones. And the only occasions where you are allowed to go outside and have a walk is when you can show that you actually go and see a grocery store. And you cannot just go to any grocery store, you should go to the next one in your area. So you cannot just walk around and visit your favorite Carrefour, right? So this is the issue, and actually they are checking for that quite frequently. So the security forces in the Kurdistan region, the Assyriology, they are on the road the whole time. They check for the people, and there are also very expensive fines for people who drive by car. So you cannot use your car no matter what distance it is. If you are caught doing that, then you have to pay, I think it's around $200 as a fine. Yeah. In the German case, it's quite different. So first, I mean, it was a very individual decision depending on your working space. So your boss could basically and can still basically decide whether you can go and work from home, have home office, do everything from there on, not come to the office anymore or not. So we have a situation where, I mean, I have a lot of friends who are like, you know, in the higher managing area of different bigger companies, and they have that privilege, right? So their boss is just like, okay, go ahead. You have your laptop, you have your company connection, you can just go home, work from there. Everything is okay. But I mean, big companies such as Amazon, for example, where many people are working together on some tight space in big factories, those are not regulated. So we have a situation in Germany where, especially when it comes to the private sector, there is still a lot unregulated. What was regulated actually is the regulation of the social life. So a few days ago, I think it was the 20th of this month, I think, the Chancellor Angela Merkel, she held a speech and talked about the situation, and then decided upon some specific points. So you should, in any case, stay at home unless you have to go to work. Any public gatherings and all of that is outlawed. And if you go out privately, you can only go out with one person that is also in your household, right? So this is the measures that they want to take to flatten the curve, as is said often in these last days, right? So, but the problem is what you see here right now is that obviously you can see that the public sector, which is not really present in Germany compared to the private sector, right? If you compare it with Iraq or the Kurdistan region, the private sector can still mostly decide on their stuff. So, for example, there was the decision on the 27th on a economic stabilization fund for really big companies in Germany, where they can apply for extra funding or they can get some help. But not the same can be said for middle size or small size businesses, right? So in Germany, it's still a big economic issue, and many companies, and I have seen some of those emails myself, just openly tell their employees, like, either you go and you know, you can get your doctor to say, okay, that person is sick and has to stay home, then you have a paid leave, obviously. But the problem for many is that many can hardly get an appointment at the doctor. Many are afraid to actually go to the doctor, right? Because like you have this situation going on. And so, and even if people have asymptomatic that looks like the coronavirus, many people cannot even get the testing because if they call the health ministry, many people have the problem with that. If they are not risk patients, if they are not of older age, they cannot directly get the test. So this is also a problem. There's a big scarcity when it comes to the test. So what we can see is that the private life is regularized like very much right now at this point, right? So obviously you cannot just go out, you cannot go out and have a beer with your friends, you cannot just meet with anyone, you cannot just invite people to your home and all of that. But when it comes to work, you will have to still go to work if your employer decides to do that and to say that you still have to come, right? So this is like a really, really hard situation for a lot of people also that I know that do not have the luck to have a understanding employer, right? And in the Kurdistan region, it's obviously quite different because you have a huge public sector, right? So most people are ta'in, so their employer is the state, right? So they work for like in different parts of the public sector. And so if the government decides to shut that down and send everyone home, that is done quite easily, right? So it's not like in the private sector. What is the case here right now is that we have a private sector in Kurdistan, and it's actually growing in the last years. But well, the private sector is obviously not as private as it looks like, right? So the most private sector, big companies are in the end somehow connected to party politics or, governmental politics in Kurdistan. So if the government, if a specific party that has the upper hand in Kurdistan decides that everyone has to stay home and is not allowed to work anymore, go to work anymore, then they also have to abide to that. So that's obviously a completely different situation, right? So economically, it's also a very, very different situation. Another problem is that we also have the situation that many, many people in the public sector have not been paid their proper rent until now, right? They have not been paid properly. So a lot of people are actually waiting for their governmental funding, which is actually due in these days. So as it was announced in the last days, apparently, especially people from the security sector, people from the health sector, and people from the education sector should get their salaries these days, right? So it was really, really delayed. And even the salaries that they will get these days are the salaries from December. So what you see right now is a situation that also shows how working and being employed in the public sector works in Kurdistan. You are employed because there is money under the ground, there is oil, and that money has to somehow get into the economic system. So you are not employed because you have such a important role in the public sector in most cases, right? Not everyone is like a cancer doctor or something like that, or like some physician or anything, right? Most people sadly have jobs where they just sit in an office and they get government money to just be there, right? It's the old rentier state system. That's the issue that Iraq also has. Obviously, many other countries have. So of course, regulating the public sector and the private sector and regulating who is working and who is staying home is way easier in a system like a rentier state, right? So you also have to see that comparison in that case. But still, there are points where you clearly see, and that's my most important point of this talk today, the difference in the social reception and the social management of what this crisis is. So we see this crisis is very, very serious. Many people are dying. It's spreading all over the world, and people are really, really afraid. So we are in a situation where we have this this big enemy, you could say, that we cannot control. We do not even fully know. We do not know how to tackle, but it's everywhere. It's risking everyone everywhere, basically. So how do people react to that kind of uncertainty? How do people cope with that kind of uncertainty? And obviously, someone who is like, let's say, younger than 70 years or something, 60 years, that person, if that is a native German, let's say, that person has not seen any major war or major crisis on his or her own soil, right? And to look at that and to have this precedent in your life, in your biography, to have lost everything at some point is actually influencing how people act and react to crisis very much. So I mean, obviously, in Kurdistan and in many countries in the Middle East, you have the problem that there are a lot of conspiracy theories every time. So you see a lot of people that go around and they're like, I don't know, I think it was some Shia, yeah, I will definitely get to that too. some Shia leader who said like, I would rather die than than get some vaccine by Israel. And there was a younger user who tweeted under that tweet, who was responding like, get the hell out of my bay. If that backside is there, I need it, right? I want to have it. So it's interesting. Obviously, there are people that still bring politics into it. They still bring conspiracy theories into it, but others don't. What is the interesting case in Kurdistan is the only fraction that actually really pushed this a kind of conspiracy theoretical narrative was actually the very religious side, because those in the beginning said, well, these mosques are locked down because the government hates Muslims, right? It's the old argument. So they want to keep us from preaching and practicing our religion because they hate our religion and everything. Ironically and sadly, the first person that died due to the coronavirus was a priest, was a imam from Sulaimaniyya, and he had some prior illnesses. He was quite old, but he died, and he also, like, his family contracted the virus too, so his children, his wife, and everything. So the irony is that this let's say, part of the whole conspiracy narrative was pretty much shut down by this very horrible fact, because that was a point when they realized, oh my God, this is real, like this is happening, and it's really everywhere and everything, right? So I really got to say, even if I talk to people, like, quite frankly, my grandma, she cannot read and write, right? So she gets all of her info from a religious radio channel, so she listens to that all the time to get her info. And her info is perfectly balanced. So she is not telling me any conspiracy theory. She's not telling me that, I don't know, the Zionists are behind it or something. Because let me tell you, like, these radio channels, as you might know, they spread some crazy stuff. But actually on this issue, there is a quite reasonable and quite substantive amount of, normal conversation and info that is being spread. Also, the other issue that I want to talk about is hoarding. So what we see in Germany a lot is that people are hoarding a lot. So my own mom, who is sitting in Germany right now, she has a problem that she cannot find any flour anymore. There's a lot of stuff that you cannot get anymore. Everyone's talking about toilet paper not being available anymore. And that also says a lot about the way a society reacts to that. So no one is hoarding in Kurdistan. No one is hoarding here because no one expects his or her neighbor to take something away from them. No one would expect that. That is not something that you would socially assume. But hoarding says a lot about what you expect from other people. And in Germany, it's a quite individualist approach to a situation like this. So that is a very big problem. Also, and that's my most important point at the end, it's about how to manage crisis as a person that has seen collective catastrophe. If we look at the situation right now, if you look at everyone in Kurdistan right now, in the Kurdistan region right now, almost everyone has experienced being an IDP or being a refugee at some point. And this is something you have to bear in mind. If a human has once or twice or even multiple times felt what it feels like to, lose everything, to have to leave your place, to be dependent on informal and unofficial channels of solidarity, then this makes something with the society. I mean, like, of course you could say Middle Eastern people are very fatalist and they're not organized and everything, but you have to think about why someone should think that organizing makes sense if they did not have this experience at any time. And obviously, as I have seen, it was also commented here. I can see it already. So the young generation has never experienced that. The young generation has never seen something like that. So it's a generational thing, and it has something to do with experiences that you have made before. So these are my points so far. As I already said, this is, of course, not a fully representative view on it. I am representing a lot that I get in conversation with my friend and also conversations with my friends here and in Germany and all of that. And this is something that I gathered up, and I'm happy to discuss that with you and further. And I thank you so much for listening to me. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Dastan. It's a very interesting and important perspective and a comparative perspective of Germany and Kurdistan. One of the main issues and consequences of coronavirus, apart from its disastrous medical implications and consequences, is actually the cultural consequences, the social ones. The decision to lock down cities, the decision to close borders between countries, the decision to stop people from going out, limiting their movement. As we discussed in our first talk with Rabbi Asa, the decision to stop people from practicing their faith.
Sorry, my connection just was lost, so I could not hear your point. I'm really sorry. Thanks.
Yeah, I was saying that the decision to stop people from practicing not just their normal life. We have beliefs, we have religions, we have faith, we have many other social things. And there was a point raised by Rabbi Asa in the first talk, was a very sensitive one. It's about the relation between the wife and the husband in the Judaism. And I'm sure there are many other similar cases in other religions, in other cultures, etc. From your perspective, what are the consequences of, and I know the Kurdish communities in Kurdistan, they are very active, socially active. The streets never get empty. I mean, how did they respond to this culturally, and also the activism, the meaning of the freedom of movement? Because I know in Kurdistan, for example, there are some opposition parties who might think, just like in France, the opposition thinking that the French government is using the pandemic of corona to limit the movement of the freedom of movement of these parties. So how do you see this? Is this obvious in Kurdistan? Do you see it clearly in the public discourse of the Kurdish people? And I will before you answer my question, I will give the floor to our distinguished guest. If they have any questions, you are welcome to ask Dastan. But just please write in the chat that you have a question, and then unmute your microphone.
Also, I just wanted to point out that because I lost the connection, I do not have the things that you wrote before in the chat anymore, right? So I do not have that in the group chat anymore. But I remember there was a point on the DDR by Anne.
Yes, she said East Germany faced dictatorship, and there is another point which is very important. It's about the young generation in Germany has never experienced distress. I'm not sure this is completely true, because terrorism recently was one of the problems in Europe that brought back the same memory of the Second World War. The floor is to you and to our guests who might have questions to ask.
So I also got okay, East-West conflict. I will note that, Anna. And by Kaksaman, I also got a point to talk about the healthcare system challenge. So I can get to that quickly.
Yeah, and there is a point I also asked here. I hope you comment on it, which is This is a quote from a French philosopher who said recently, it's in French, but the meaning in English, he says that we are ruled by a generation that has never experienced famine, wars, panic, young generation that doesn't know nothing about wars. So how do you see this in Kurdistan, and you compare it to Germany too? Thank you. I will stop talking. The floor is to you.
Ms. Liz said she has a question, so she can say it.
Hello. Thank you for putting this together. I have a question for both of you, because you talked about individualism and how it's affecting the way that people are socially and culturally reacting to the policies that are being instituted. I read an article maybe a week ago about France and its implementation of what I view as somewhat rigid confinement rules, but I understand the point of them. And they have 90% approval rating from the French populace. However, when you talk about, I'm not even a country like the United States, but states within the United States, I feel like implementing the kind of policies that we need in order to stop the propagation of the virus are not possible, because people would feel like it's a little bit too much of an authoritarian regime. So in kind of bringing this together, not just like comparing it between the US, but we often think of the Western world as being very individualistic, but I think there's different degrees, and maybe you both can enlighten me on this, between the difference between France, because I know Professor Mohammed is in France with us right now, but also like between Germany and France, and how that's showing, like, is there a difference to kind of what we traditionally just write off as Western individualism, and how can that be infected not only by the experiences that have been, or that have come to this generation in this lifetime, but maybe by history?
Okay, I noted this. So are there further questions?
Yeah, I think you can start with the questions you have, and then probably there will be other questions will come up.
Okay, so I will first of all start with what you have already talked about. So the issue with the opposition and everything. So quite frankly, I mean, like, obviously, when it comes to Kurdistan and you listen to a person like me, you're wondering, okay, what is her political take? Like, is she someone who's supporting the establishment? Is she someone who's left-wing, right-wing? I don't know what. So obviously, in the beginning, everyone assumes that you are biased in some way, and obviously, every one of us is biased. So, of course, I am someone who wants to see Kurdistan prosper and develop. So I support a lot of the points that the opposition makes, right? So a very important point of the opposition is that the strategy that the Kurdistan region has right now for this health crisis, where the lockdown actually was extended until April 15th, right? So it will all in all be a month at least of lockdown, which is not like some days or something. What they say is like, we cannot accept a situation where everyone is taken in jeopardy, you know, because of the virus and all the other political issues that are very important that we need to talk about, which is especially the salaries, the public servants' salaries that have not been paid until now, you know, the disputes between Erbil and Baghdad, all of the situations, everything that you have going on right now. We cannot just postpone that. We have to talk about this, because otherwise, what is going to happen if we are out again, right? This is a really important question that is coming up a lot. And as you said, Ahmed, like, these people here have fought a lot for their freedom. For a fact, my own aunt, who is from Khanaqin, who faced a lot of oppression during the Ba'ath regime, she pretty much had a panic attack when she heard sirens. So she's living in Amman right now, and when the lockdown started, they used these sirens, and she had a panic attack because she did not hear that voice anymore, that sound anymore for like what, 30 years or something, right? So we should remember that these are people that did a lot for their freedom and they cherish it, and it's not too long ago that people lived in a dictatorship. So obviously people are criticizing a lot about that and about these harsh measures. But and that's another thing that I tweeted some days ago. The problem is that still, as Liz already said, this is a virus, and it's still, it should be looked at politically, but the measures that you do against it are of a different nature. And I think we are at a very important point where we have to have a really nuanced discussion on what falls under the area of, liberal citizen rights and citizen freedom, and on the other side, what falls under stuff that we really have to do to flatten the curve. And I mean, if you look at the numbers in the Kurdistan region, we are a direct neighbor of Iran. Iran is sending so much stuff to the Kurdistan region. There is so much, like there's so many connections on the tourist level, on the medical level, on the economic level. The fact that we have such a low number of people that are positive is really due to these really, really quick measures. And we have to remember that, right? And this is actually something that the Kurdistan region has in mind. So for example, another example for that is if you want to get a residence permit in the Kurdistan region, you have to make a blood test where you can prove that you do not have HIV. Because the Kurdistan health system is full aware that if any person, HIV, would come in and people would not care or not, take care of how things are going, then, everything is doomed. So there is a sensitivity for that. There is a big, big conflict in the discourse going on. People are discussing this a lot, and it's a really hard topic, and people really think about that. And that's valid. That's valid. I think we should have these discussions. And, some people are saying, you Kurdish people, you never have one opinion and everything. I always say this is our win. Our win is that we never had one opinion, but because of that, we have a very, very clear understanding of a democratic culture of this. So I have seen that, to the second point, the discussion is going on about the nature of conflict. And I really understand that. I do not want to say that there was not a conflict, right? So this is not what I want to say. I want to say that there are different characteristics of conflict, and there are different levels of how much a conflict is going to affect you personally, right? What are the odds that, I don't know, the Soviets were going to run into your town, that, an atomic bomb is going, to explode in your backyard, that some war is going to happen, all of that. And a lot of that stuff has also a lot to do with the emotional reaction, emotional awareness, having a feeling that this is going to happen or not. But in the Kurdish case, I really need to remember, you guys, 1974, we had a mass exodus of Kurdish people. In the 80s, we had a mass exodus. We had the Anfal operation. In 91, we had a mass exodus. Even in 2003, when Saddam was about to be caught by the Americans, my relatives that are from the area next to the Iranian border, they took their stuff and they went to Iran for some weeks because they said, this guy is going to nuke us, right? He's going to do something. So what I'm trying to say is this is a very, very direct, absolutely present kind of conflict structure of losing everything, of losing absolutely everything. Of course, Eastern Germany was in a dictatorial system. Of course, people could not have free speech. People had a lot of problems. People could not freely move and everything. That's absolutely the case. But this notion of a crisis that does not differ between people, that does not differ between rich or poor, where everyone has to leave. Everyone has to leave. If you do not want to be gassed by someone, you have to leave. The the gas bombs of Saddam Hussein, they did not make a difference between people being rich or poor. And that is the kind of logic that I'm talking about, if I make that clear a little bit more. I do not in any way want to say that, the East-West conflict was not a conflict, or, DDR was not a dictatorship, obviously. Although there might be some German leftist people that will now hate me for saying that. But I am not here for ideological propaganda, right? So there was also the issue of age, right? The young generation, and the fact that the young generation has not seen stuff like that and everything. But, I do not think that it's necessarily a thing of age. I think it's a lot about communication. I mean, look at me. I was born in 93 in Germany. I did not see any war in my life. But I have seen war through the eyes of my parents, right? I have seen it through their experiences. I understood it through their experiences, which is why I then got into the issue and tried to understand it more, So the issue is that I really, I understand the point. I understand that there is an argument where you say, okay, there is a younger age that did not see the same thing, older age that sees the same thing. But I think in the West, that is not necessarily the case. You have a pretty stable standard of living, especially in Germany, I would even say the opposite. I would even say the young generation that has to face something like global warming and the catastrophe that is going to come, that has to see the inequality in this world, that had to see how, people were basically like a whole new populist movement rise in Germany after the financial crisis, and right now that has to see that especially people of color in Germany that are young have to see that they are at risk of being shot by right-wing militants. So I really would say that actually, as a person in Germany, you might have had the time of your life in the 80s or 90s, and right now we are at a completely different stage where you have a completely different situation of anger and fear and problems and global problems. And I think this is also important to bear in mind. I think the young generation has a very big idea of the fact that their problems are very global and they have to be solved globally. So I think this is actually an asset in combating this, if you look at it. So another issue that was talked about, I could not follow it okay. The healthcare challenge in Kurdistan. So the issue is that we have a quite interesting development in the Kurdistan region, actually in the last, say, 20 years. So before, especially during the 90s, you had the oil for food program, and Iraq was under sanctions, and Kurdistan was under sanctions by Saddam, and then you had a situation where public health and all of that was pretty much a charity issue. It was something that was highly backed by UNHCR or many NGOs and stuff like that. So you had a situation where the healthcare system that used to be in governmental hands during the times when Saddam had his hands over the Kurdistan region suddenly was taken out of this private sector and was taken into this NGO sector. Okay, Adela, I see your question. And so the issue is that, so first you have this NGOization, you could say, of the public health sector, which was a very humanitarian kind of approach to everything. But then, obviously, after 2003, especially after 2005, after the influence that the Kurdistan region had, after all of the developments, all of the investments from different countries, you all of a sudden have to, you have a situation where, there's a lot of private clinics. So to tell you an example, when I was here a year ago, I had to make a blood test, right? So I tried to do it in a good place where, I get some proper results and I do not faint or something. So I went to a private hospital that was, specialized in this. So I paid around, I think, $70 and I got a perfect test, but it's the private sector, right? So
Dastan, just are you following the questions? Because you have many questions waiting for you.
Yes, I have seen from Laith too.
Yes, but you have one before Layth. It's a very important.
Yeah, Adila,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Adila and Laith are added, right? So we have three or like 3 points, and so the one by Liz, the one by Adela, and one by Laith, right? So the issue is that you, of course, get a way better service by the private sector, because the private sector in health is the one that is ruling right now, right? So if you go to a city like Erbil and you want to get a good surgery or you want to get something done, then this is actually something where many people trust the private sector, and that's actually a really dangerous thing. There are a lot of really, really, really good doctors in the public sector. That is no question. I do not want to put that in any question, right? But it is not something that is comparable to the investment that was done in the private sector. Also, there is not something like health insurance, like collective health insurance or stuff like that. So you really, really, like, your health depends on the money that you have. And obviously, the people that are rich enough, they get their stuff done in Europe or in India or something, if they can afford that. So the healthcare system challenge, I would say right now, is a situation where we have a 2-class or even 3-class system, and it really depends on your money, whether you have a good chance of getting this done or not. And so I think we should really, like, from the governmental part, we should really think about combining this, regulating this, investing more into public health, and really providing a possibility for a collective health insurance that is possible for the people, right? So the next point by Liz was talking about the issue with the individual freedom, and that's as I already talked about it. I mean, here in Kurdistan right now, this is also a big discussion, right? So people are saying, okay, to which point is this a measure that is going to save our lives, and to what point is this really taking away our freedom? And this is a really important discussion that we need to have. I mean, like, obviously, you cannot just sit around and just accept all kinds of points where, freedom of movement and all kind of stuff is taken away from people. But I think the good thing is that people are realizing more and more that the governments tend to be rigorous in some parts that consider the private sector, the individual sector in that kind. But there are sectors where they do not do anything. And I mean, if we look at the situation in the United States right now, I mean, today I saw this tweet by Antonio Guterres, who said, well, we donated, like, I don't know what, 500,000 face masks to the New York City doctors or some sort of hospital in New York City. How can that be possible? How can that be possible? So I think the question that many people are asking right now is not only how quickly are you able to cut individual freedom, which is something that you need to do in this case, obviously, because, social distancing and all of that, but are you also willing to tackle all of the other, also economic parts of the problem? Are you going to tackle the fact that, more and more hospitals, especially in Germany, were privatized, a lot of stuff was, cut under, all of that stuff, all of these problems, people are talking about that. So I think, do you want to add something?
Yeah, my question was more geared towards looking at kind of like the already existing social cultural atmosphere of individualism in the West, and how it's going to vary now depending on the reactions. Because like I said, in France, people are very, very receptive to the limitation of their freedoms. They have a 90% approval rating of the steps that are being taken. In the United States, it's not the case. So my question is more, maybe, and like, I think the comparison that can be made, because I think it might be a little bit unfair to ask you to make comments on the US, although I'm more than happy if you will. But like, the comparison that could be made between you and Professor Mohammed Omar is that that between like maybe France and Germany in terms of what the reaction is, because in Germany I think there's a little bit of a hesitance to implement or to call things kind of what was the word? I had a German friend specifically tell me that there's a very, very big, they're tiptoeing around the word curfew and things like this.
Yeah.
There's differences in how people are receptive to this, but there's also differences in the way that they're responding culturally and socially. where trans people are more falling into the collective. And I see this with a lot. People are very, very collective. And so that kind of pushes against the grain or the rhetoric of, you know, just the Western individualism. So that's what I think that's what I'm trying to like grapple with a little bit. And I think that in Kurdistan, from what you've said, this collective has been cemented, it's been built, it's been solidified in the kind of recurring or the direct conflict structure that you talked about. And so I'm just kind of wondering on what comments you guys may have regarding that.
I mean, before Omar talks about it, because obviously he sees the situation in France, which I do not, although I spent my New Year's there, which was really nice because it was the grève. I don't know, is the grève still going on?
Sometimes.
No, it's postponed after Corona.
Okay, amazing. I thought that they would straight up go through that grève even if there's Corona, right? But no, I totally see your point. But the issue is, I mean, this is classical France, right? This is how society works in France. This is very, very centralist kind of system. It's a very centralist kind of society. It's one where if something is going on, then it's going on like that. And obviously it's a presidential system, right? So I think these systematic points also reflect into what the people do. And I mean, in Germany, it's like the other way around, as Anna has, for example, pointed out, individual freedom for many people that have, for example, seen the experience of not only Nazi Germany, but also the DDR. For them, it's like really, really important, right? But the thing is, you know, the thing is in France, I would not see it in the same way as in Kurdistan, because like in Kurdistan, the people follow these orders right now because they understand that this is the best way to go, like objectively, right? But they do not do that because they normally follow orders very much, right? Or like collectively go into one direction. Obviously, we have many, many different political parts. So I think there is a bit more fractionalization in that point than in the French case. I mean, even if you look at the grève culture, it's a good example because, like, you know, in Germany, no one would do a collective grève. Like, no way, this is not going to happen, right? Like, even if they, when they announced it in the metro stations, they said un mouvement social, right? And they did not say c'est en grève. They said because of a mouvement social. Whereas in the German translation, they said wegen eines Streiks, right? So even in the language, it's very different. So I think it's also about the political French versus German characters. So I might see the difference, but definitely let's see what Omar has to say to that.
I actually would like you to answer these questions of Asa, but before that, can we get a German perspective from a German citizen who is attending this discussion too? Annika, can you give us your perspective, please? We would like to hear your perspective, if you don't mind.
What? I was chatting, sorry, I was not.
I think Adela is also in Germany right now. So if you also want to hear her take, or if Adela is...
Well, you want to know how the people react to the situation.
Yeah, it's, I mean, your perspective.
I think it's very difficult to say in general. I think there's a big difference between big cities and the countryside, for example. I personally live in an area in a small, relatively small town, which is very Catholic, very conservative. I think people here are mostly following the rules and can more or less accept the situation, but I think it's very difficult to big cities like Berlin or Cologne, for example.
Well, thank you. I would give, as requested, 2 minutes to Saman. Saman, please. Saman, do you hear me? You are muted. Yes. Can you hear me? Yes.
Now you hear? Can I start?
Yes, please. Go ahead.
Hello, how are you? In Kurdish, Chawanan.
Pasha, Pasha.
So just I wanted to share. So I totally agree with our, Miss Dastan. She pointed a lot about what I wanted to share, which is in KRG now we have a lot of the refugee and IDP. So it's over 1.5 million we have. So in case this, the the virus, if separate, so you're gonna suffering a lot, and even we have a lot of challenge that our primary health care system facing, which is the lack of the the hospital, the medical, and even so really we ask the international community to come and to give it's okay, it's clear, it's till today there is no enough there is a slow response to how limit the danger of the virus, but really in a KRG we're suffering. So the policy that the KRG taken, let's say, was quite good, but I think we need more support. And if I go, deep, to limit the danger of the virus, so in international community, the coordinating and let's say the close ranks necessary at that time. Hopefully, all international, let's say the power, state power, they do their best to limit the danger of the virus, and hope I delivered my message. That's all.
Thank you, Saman. Thank you, Saman. Does anyone have a comment before I give it back to Dastan?
And so far, my number of questions is, or the order is Adila, Laith, Ariana, and Asa. Is that correct?
Then I think you can start answering the questions better. Yeah. Go ahead, Dastan.
Yeah, go in that direction. Okay. So let me go back to Adila. I have a hard time scrolling in here.
Saman, could you please mute? Yes.
Okay. The psychological differences. Okay. Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I mean, to be quite frank with you, you know, fatalism is what is pretty much in a short term saving people's lives in a country where people have been through multiple wars. So I think the psychological complex of most people here is that they are fatalist in the sense that not they are like totally giving up on everything, but they try to make the best out of every situation. And that is really something that I had to learn. And religion really plays a role in that. I mean, like, to be honest, when I grew up, I was just like, you know, religion, no one needs that. And, you know, go away with that old stuff and everything. But when you see some of the biographies of these people that live here and that trying to make a living, trying to have a life, trying to, you know, develop and go forward, you see that believing in some greater good, in some greater idea of humanity is really something that is helping people. And I do not even want to call it romantic or something, but this is really how people are trying to keep up their mental health. I mean, you have to remember, most people here have not even fathomed what happened during the whole ISIS situation, right? You have people that have experienced multiple wars, multiple times of, you know, being displaced and all of that stuff. So I think people are in a situation where they have this basic sense of fatalism that is really helping them get through these situations. But the problem in the long term is that people do not realize that their mental health is a ticking time bomb, and many people suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder, or not even post-traumatic, like they are in the trauma itself. They have multiple levels of trauma. And so I see that in the short term, actually the collective social psychological situation of the people here is suitable for crisis situations, but in the long term it's a very, very difficult task. I mean, I can only recommend, there's a great New York Times article where they talk to Jan Ilhan Kizilhan, who is a professor in traumatology and who made the first faculty of traumatology in the University of Duhok. So he's talking about this issue, and I can really, really recommend that, to look at the psychological situation. And I mean, and I mean, the German angst is something very, very, you know, I don't want to go like into cliches or something, but it's a specific type of life where every part of your life could somehow be calculated, right? You have there is not many things in a normal German life that cannot at some point be anticipated, right? You have insurance for everything. You can calculate everything. You can predict almost everything. It's crazy, right? I mean, like, this is something that I had to get used to. Believe me, the first time I came here to work, I was going crazy. I was like, how the hell am I supposed to work here if I don't know when electricity is there and when not, when there's water and when there's not? All of these things, it's influencing it. But the irony is that I think the more people have this security, the more they get afraid, because they are in this perfect calculated world where just the slightest errors just making people crazy. And so this might be a approach to an interpretation that I would have on the psychological side. So let me get to Leif Kamal. I have a question from Jasim. How do you expect this pandemic to alter the trust dynamic between state and people in Germany? Well, we have a democratic crisis in Germany anyways. We have a lot of people that are not voting still. We have a lot of people that actually are unemployed. We have a strong correlation between unemployment and not voting. We have a strong support for the AfD, for the right-wing party in Germany. So we have a huge backing for this populist anti-establishment argument. So in this anti-establishment argument, the government is the enemy, right? And someone like Angela Merkel is just like the enemy by herself. Like when she made this speech where she talked about the lockdown and she announced it, I was actually talking to a friend parallel to that. And I swear to God, whatever Merkel said, she was going crazy. She was like, what is she saying? Da, 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 what is she doing? And it's like everyone is just angry at her. And like me as a, leftist person, I am not even that angry with her, because like people really go crazy about the smallest thing. And so this is really a dangerous point. So what could happen is that this crisis is actually debunking all of the stuff that the right-wing parties are spreading. That is an argument that I hear a lot right now in media. So they say, like, the last weeks during the crisis, there was not really an answer by the right-wing AfD. So what the AfD is doing, that in a situation where people are objectively doing good, they are finding a boogeyman, and then they are making everyone afraid of that boogeyman and aggressive and going crazy on that specific picture of an enemy, right? But what is happening right now is that we have an actual crisis, and the right-wing movement does not know how to react to that. They don't have an approach to that. So what I see is that actually this could be a chance. This could be a chance for, first of all, people asking themselves, what world are we living in? Like, what world are we living in if we are one of the most industrialized countries in the world, and you still have like a significant number spreading conspiracy theories on this virus? What are we doing if we have a significant number of people hoarding, although it's not necessary? We will not have a cut in or shortage in food or anything. That's not going to be the case. And what country do we live in where people cannot have like an answer to the actual crisis at the situation? So I think this is a chance. I think this is really a chance for people to think about a lot of stuff. But I think it's only a chance if we are also able to look at the economic part of the problem. So yeah, the dynamic is problematic right now, but at least the right-wing dynamic that is really complicating the situation between the state and the people, that could really be debunked in these days as a chance. I don't know if it's not going to happen, you know. Germany is not really the country of revolutions, as you know. So Ariana is the next question, and then Asa. Ariana asked, I have a question. How will this affect the public and private sector in Kurdistan? Well, the public sector is doing bad anyways. It's the, you know, and this is maybe something also on the point of Kaksaman, with all my respect, but really, the Kurdistan region has had like almost 20 years of oil revenues. A lot of money for some million people. And I do not know how the budgeting of the Kurdistan region can work in this way if we still do not have a proper healthcare system. The thing is that there are many rentier states in this world, but most of these rentier states take care of their own stuff first and then take care of other people. And so this is a problem. We cannot deny this. I understand that there are many refugees. I understand that this is a crisis. I understand all of this. And it's hard for the Kurdistan region. But there is a lot of NGOs that are in the region, that pay a lot of stuff, that do a lot of programs, that do all kinds of stuff. There is a lot of support that the Kurdistan region got, whether it's from the European Union, whether it's from the US, or anything else. There is a whole private sector that was basically built up by Turkey for the Kurdistan region. There are so many agreements that have been done for the Kurdistan region. And some of them want to tell me that there was not enough money to have a proper healthcare system. And this is not a problem that is starting right now. I have heard some horrific stories from people that do not have the money to go to a private hospital, and that told me that this is basically a life to death decision. It's a question whether you have the money or not. So with all due respect, we have to talk about the stuff that the Kurdistan region cannot influence, which is the refugee crisis, which is the fact that they are taking care of millions of IDPs. But we also have to think about the fact that there has been so much oil revenue, so much money in this system, a lot of this money missing, although other companies have been paid to hide that. And so this is really something that we have to talk about, because this cannot go on this way. This can really not go on this way. I think it's nice that there are Kurdish charities, for example, that are giving care packages out right now. But care packages? We are a developed region. We have a lot of money under ourselves. This cannot be the case, that taking care of your people becomes a charity, right? And this is the same problem with Iraq. Don't get me wrong, because the first thing that these people will say is, yeah, you're backing Iraq or the central government. It's the same thing with the central government. It's a problem of the rentier state right now, right? But this is really, we have to think about this stuff. So this is the issue, right? So this is really, really a lot of stuff to take for the public sector. The public sector had a lot of problems in the first place. And the private sector, to be honest, it's also going to bring them a halt, right? It's really a bad situation for the private sector that is really nascent, especially middle class incomes. There has been a initiative in the last weeks where people said, hey, if you're a landlord, for example, please do not take this month's rent, right? So people are trying to decentrally do something to help like small businesses or like mid-level businesses and stuff like that. But still, it's going to be a huge, huge problem for them. And there's a lot of people that are self-employed, that have jobs, that just invested in some business, and they are facing a hard time right now. And they're very reasonable. Like, I have seen a lot of interviews also in TV where people were just really calm, and they said, look, we understand the situation, but we need the government to also propose some plan for the future, because this is going to be very problematic for our businesses, right? So,
sorry for interrupting you. We have only
I was just done.
Yeah, we have only 10 minutes left.
Very good. So then we go to the last question, Asa. In Germany, is the response mostly on the federal level, or is there divergent responses among the various German states? Okay. And what is the relationship in the response between the KRG and Iraqi government? Is KRG autonomous in its corona response? You said Erbil also. Yeah. I mean, when it comes to the
since the last question is a very interesting question, we can extend, if you all agree, for another 10 minutes. So you have 20 minutes.
Oh God. Okay. I definitely will need a white wine after that. So that's okay. But yeah. So in Germany, there has been some points. I think it was also because of the testing. So the situation right now is that the testing is making a lot of problems for many hospitals, and you have a different situation in the different Länder, right? So, for example, North Rhine-Westphalia has a lot of cases, and they are really lacking some of the tests. In other states where they have more tests, they have more capabilities, it's really hard for them. So there is some differences, right? There are some points where they are, let's say, discussing how to make it together. There's there was even an initiative by Baden-Württemberg, which is in the southwest of Germany, land in the southwest of Germany, and they even made an initiative where they were accepting patients from France, right, with the coronavirus, because it's one of the very rich areas in Germany, and they have the capabilities to take care of that. So there is some differences, but this is really, since it's like a crisis situation, a lot of stuff is actually centrally done from the ministries and centrally done from the chancellor. So a lot of stuff is done like that, but it really depends. I mean, if it comes to the lockdown and everything, that was done by the chancellor, obviously. Yeah, when it comes to the federal stuff, I think there is not even, I mean, if you look at the policy aspects that would be in state hand, it is not too many. I think it's actually not too many. I think most of it is the federal health minister, obviously the chancellor. So a lot of them take care of that. And good thing is that our health minister is a total disaster. So he actually supported, I think it was, the whole discussion was in 2018 or 2019, correct me if I'm wrong, but there was like a huge discussion with like a study where they said, you know, we can basically get rid of 500 hospitals in Germany without any problems. So many people are sharing that right now and are saying whether he still has the same opinion, right? So that's really kind of a problem on the federal level that they did not take care of. But I'm happy if anyone has to add something on the federal versus state level question. What is the relationship in the response? I mean, I am desperately trying to get some info on the coronavirus from other parts of Iraq, and I have a hard time doing that, and I'm pretty sure that many people have a hard time doing that because a lot is not said. There has been so much misinformation. There have been, you know, some religious ceremonies and stuff that were still held, although they said 100 times, like, guys, this is serious, this is dangerous. Also, obviously, Iraq is like a playing ground for Iran, and Iranian people and Iranian businessmen and Iranian clerics and all of them have been walking in and out of Iraq whenever they wanted to. Whether it's for military reasons, economic reasons, any kind of reason. So, and there is not even clear information on the situation at the border, like how secure the borders are closed or not. Actually, what I find really weird at this time is that I have the feeling, correct me if I'm wrong, Ahmad or Saman, I have the feeling that even in the public discourse and news, they talk more about the problems of the Iraqi government than the problems that are going to come up if this epidemic is going to go crazy. And Iraq is absolutely not prepared for that. So actually, I am really, really bothered for Iraq. The Kurdistan region could take care of these decisions. They could take care of that independently. So they locked down earlier. They locked down the regions and the airports. And later, Baghdad also did that, right? So don't get me wrong. This is not something about the policy issue, right? Or whether like Erbil is doing something better than Baqa or anything else. This is not the issue. This is not the issue. And I tell you that as someone who's like my father's hometown, Khanaqin, it belongs to Iraq. It does not belong to the Kurdistan region. So if Iraq is going to shit, basically, then my family is going to shit too. And I do not like that. So there are some people that might be happy that Iraq is doing bad, but I am not that kind of person. And the problem is that really there is no proper testing. There is a lot of situations going on where like people are still moving around, people are still going in and out to Iran and back, and whatever. Iran has the hand on everything. You have people like Muqtada Sadr sharing a statement on Twitter today that it's same-sex, same-sex sex, let's say, that is the problem of the coronavirus. And that is really making me furious. Like, we have to remember that since October last year, so many young people, I think so far it's 800 to 900, have been killed by militias that we do not even know their names. We have to see that the security sector of Iraq is a agglomeration of groups that you cannot even count it. And now you have a pandemic like this. Like, I am really, from all of my heart, and I really take this personally, I am really, really concerned with what is going to happen in Iraq with this virus, with their healthcare system, because people are really silent about that. The media is really silent about that, and it's really, really dangerous for the people. So that's the thing. Erbil is autonomous in that, but, and I mean, let's not even bullshit about this. Like, I mean, Iran has influence in Erbil. Iran has influence over the Kurdistan region, but it's not to the extent like in Baghdad, like in the rest of Iraq. And that's the problem I see. So even if Baghdad would be like, hey, we have the perfect policy plan, we want to do this and that and this and that, and we want to get it through and, you know, help the people and you know, make the situation safe and flatten the curve. We are in a situation where you have so many non-government stakeholders in Iraq that never, ever you could find one cohesive answer to this crisis. And this is really what is scaring me. This is really like, because this is, I mean, we can talk about authoritarianism as much as we want, but really, this is a point, this is a crisis where in some measures it needs one central, coordinated, great approach. And I do not see that coming with Iraq and the political system there right now. And that's really making, like, that's, I have to say that's sad, really. Yeah.
Yep. Can we go to the Mr. Dogan's question? So,
Taner Doğan, what kind of impact will digitalized communication have in Germany in post-corona periods? In fact, we witness how authorities use the, so yes. Yeah, that's the issue. So obviously you have heard many people talking about, you know, this widespread testing being a good approach to doing something against the virus. And I mean, obviously, when you compare the numbers you see in the countries like South Korea or China, they were able to really push down the numbers. But this is obviously it's a very, very dangerous approach, right? Especially when you do not have a clear idea of how the data is going to be used. So I think this really, like, I mean, like, it made me really worn out to always say like, you know, this is a very Orwellian situation. It's a very dystopian situation, but it is this, right? This is really a scenario where like many people in international health, many people in international relations, many people in the epidemiological sector have talked about this kind of scenario, and this is really something that people have been thinking about. So I think we will have a great debate on that, because this discussion that we already talked about between, you know, a very centralized, effective approach against the virus, and on the other side, individual freedoms. I think this discussion of these two sides is going to reflect as well into the digital surveillance part. And I mean, we should not forget that someone like Chelsea Manning has attempted suicide, and no one talked about it really. You know, we have a situation where something like the situation of Edward Snowden, everything that he found out, it's pretty much 2015 or something. People are not really talking about that anymore. So I am really actually curious whether the question of digitalized or like digital law, digital safety, whether this discussion can this time really be done more profoundly. And I wish it would be like that, because these are really some complicated questions. This is really some point where you really need some very you know, you really need to have an approach that comes from many different parts, and I am absolutely not the expert for that. So this is what I can say. I hope this will really bring a chance where we can stick to this debate and find an answer to that, and not just wash it away like the last time after the NSA scandal, right? I mean, also when it comes to global health, like, so this is not my area, and I am not talking about something that I do not know something about, and this is my approach to it. There might be people like Slavoj Žižek who will write a book about, I don't know, a virus, but this is not my job, so I will not talk about it, right? So I hope that there will be more qualified people that are qualified in this area that can answer these questions, but I am not that person. So I hope you understand that, right? Situation in Gelsenkirchen, Kreisheim, that the stage people openly. Well, I don't know. The issue is with people being outside. It's really strange. I hear really different things. Like some people tell me, well, like mostly people stay at home. No one is outside. You know, people are exaggerating. And some people tell me, oh my God, Dastan, everyone is outside. Everyone is going crazy. The same thing is with the hoarding. Some people like send me pictures of like empty supermarket shelves and are like, oh my God, I cannot get anything. And then there are people that are like, I'm perfectly fine. My supermarket has everything. So it's, I mean, maybe we can make a supermarket survey or like a park survey where we just collect the number of people per a square kilometer that are outside, although there is a lockdown of the city, right? Germany leads some joint response of EU or Europe, particularly following Brexit. Wasn't that expected move to show dominance within the Union? Thanks. Yeah, I mean, politically seen, Germany should never ever be again in a situation where they take any big #1 role in Europe. The European Union is still a union, and they should get their stuff done together. And that is really important. And that's also a political take of mine, obviously, right? So we have seen in the past what is happening, and we should learn from that past. And it cannot really be done if someone is just going forward. This approach has never helped anyone. I mean, look at what happened the last time when Germany was taking the initiative. Yeah, it was the financial crisis. It was 2008. Everything was going to hell. And, you know, the situation between the states was really bad. Also with the refugee crisis, it's many countries were left alone. And I think right now it's really important to find a common approach. Old age. Well, I mean, I do not have the numbers exactly, actually. I mean, if you want to, I can look it up. Just So demographic,
we don't have many old people in Iraq. They are less than 20%.
Okay. Well, so okay, fertility rate. Well, it's going down, but I mean, like life expectancy. Yeah, but I mean, yeah. I cannot find a specific number right now, but also when it comes to life expectancy, I think it's the old people is going to grow more, but still you have a lot of young people. Like you still have a lot of young people. I would even say like people under 30, around 60% or something. Could we say it's a lot of young people? But there is a problem with the aging population, especially because we have a situation where also we have many long-term health problems that are rising in Iraq. So we have a lot of problems with blood diseases. We have a lot of heart diseases. We have a lot of people that get diabetes really quickly. We have a lot of people that are obese after a point. We have a lot of new long-term illnesses that are really problematic and that are in need of taken care of in Iraq and in Kurdistan anyways, right? So this is really kind of a problem in many points. So I cannot protect that though.
I think we are. Thank you so much, Dastan, for.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Very rich, this insights and information. It actually shed the light on very important points. As one of the participants said, we never thought of this. Thank you so much. One technical question. This session has been recorded and it's intended to be made public. If you have any objection to make it public, please let me know. Otherwise, I can make only the voice record, the sound record public. If you don't want your picture to appear on YouTube, let me know. But if you don't have any objection, it will be uploaded on YouTube. We will have next week another talk show, but this time we're gonna talk about the conflict of the narrative of Corona. Who is going to write the narrative of Corona, and what scenarios are we expecting for the narrative of Corona? Because if we are thinking of something big now is happening, there is something bigger will come, which is, as they say in the war, the victorious write the history. Who's going to write the history of Corona? This is a big question. It's going to be answered hopefully next week by one of the historians. I will not tell his name now until I make sure that he will attend. Otherwise, we will be still talking about the shutdown of cultural activities by a culture curator from Dubai. She has enough experience to talk about the impact of the shutdown of culture around the world. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dastan. Thank you, everyone. And a special thank to, I hope I will not forget his name, the one who asked about the surveillance. Thank you so much for this question, Tanir. It's a very important point. Thank you. Stay home. She's full. Bitte Abstand halten.
Yeah, sehr wichtig.
And whatever it takes to keep yourself safe. And please think about the elderly, not only yourself. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.